Welcome on Texas football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by CJ Vogel. It's time for rapid reactions this Sunday morning. CJ, thanks also to our sponsor, Adam Lowy, and thanks to Arch Manning and Steve Sarkisian and the Texas defense. Longhorns in the day, 5-0 yesterday, headed into the off wink against Oklahoma. We're here to talk a little bit about it right now and just go over what we saw in this game and talk about it from a big picture perspective. You were in the house at DKR, visited with the players and coaches after the game as well. Initial thoughts from the game for you?
Yeah, I don't want to call it ugly. I won't call it ugly, Bobby, but it was certainly maybe a bit frustrating. I think in that first half is probably the best way to describe that game last night, Bobby. But it's a good learning curve. And I thought the best way that Sarkisian described it is, this team hadn't yet faced a whole lot of rough waters, and, adversity did hit a little bit against Mississippi State. And I thought, and Sarkisian mentioned it himself, there's good poise and composure shown by the Texas football team, and that's to be expected, right? You'd like to see it with the veteran bunch more so than at the quarterback and offensive line spot. But when you look at this roster and how that it's being tested right now, I mean, it was a lot of self-infliction. And to overcome that and stick to the plan and and poise and composure, again, that's going to be the theme of this conversation, I think. For that to stand out and you come away with a 22-point victory in conference, I think you take those. Despite some of the errors mentally and physically on the field that we saw, it's a win, right? So a lot to build on. And, of course, I think this is a game going into the bye week that will keep Texas, kind of razor focused. I think they know that game shouldn't have been as close as it was. For them to know that you got your two biggest games coming up this season, back to back, you got to go into this bye week and come away better than when you came into it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I look at it big picture, and I was talking to Rod Babers and Brian Robeson last night in postgame, and my takeaway from it was a lackadaisical performance at some level, a lot less than focused. I really go back to three plays. Jaden Blue gives up the ball in the red zone. That was Texas had a chance to go up by 2 scores in the first quarter. Jonte Cook drops a touchdown pass in the second quarter. And then on the first play of the third quarter, Jaden Blue fumbles again. Those are 3 miscues that were – here would be my take on it. If those were the only miscues, you could say, you know what, those are some things. But we saw holding penalties. We saw false starts. We saw missed tackles. We saw some things that were not what we had seen the first 4 weeks of this season. And I think from that perspective, it was a little concerning to me after we seen a team that was ranked number 1 in the country and had played so crisply at times this year. We saw a few things that I think that people probably didn't want to see, even though, to your point, they end up winning by 22 points in the first ever SEC game in DKR. Arch Manning is 26 of 31 for 324, 2 touchdowns, took great control or took great care of the ball, in my opinion. A lot of really positive things for the Longhorns, but I think what the lasting memory will be for folks is that kind of less than stellar focus or lack of urgency that we saw on Saturday afternoon.
It's funny. Normally when you hear about sloppy football games, you think turnovers from the quarterback, not great quarterback play. And it's kind of the complete opposite, right? I thought protection from the offensive line was tremendous in pass protection. But Arch was spectacular in my eyes. 26 of 31. We'll talk about him in a bit. But it felt like, for whatever reason, the surrounding cast wasn't necessarily up to par with that. And to those 3 plays, I absolutely agree. All 3 of them, you look at them going into the red zone, what would have been a walk-in touchdown from about 70 yards. And then another one where you just had your most successful run of the day and you get to midfield. All of those are setting you up to score and put more points on the board. And unfortunately, you're not able to take advantage and capitalize. And we saw the Texas defense, Bobby, really start to pin its ears back late in that game as they started getting into a 3-possession lead. And what did that result in? 6 sacks. If that happens, you don't see that Jaden Blue fumble early on in the red zone in that first quarter, and you're able to go up 14. Mississippi State can't run the football and own the time of possession the way that they did because they're trying to fight from behind. And as a result, that play clock is sped up.
To your point, not complimentary football.
That's
not
exactly it.
Complimentary football that we saw the first 4 weeks. And frankly, that's what you get concerned with, right? Because we know if Texas is trying to be the number one team in the country, which I think is debatable at this point, but I feel like what we're going to look at here is we're going to say, okay, they've got to this has to be a misstep game and not who they truly are. And obviously now we have 2 weeks for them to get prepared and ready for Oklahoma. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. But I want to say thank you to our sponsor before we go on. I want to talk a little bit of offense, a little bit of defense with you as well, CJ. Let's say thank you to our friend Adam Lowy over at the Lowy Law Firm. He and his law firm have been helping injured Texans for more than 2 decades now, based out of Austin, but helping people across the state. Adam, you can reach out to him if you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, including a motorcycle, 18-wheeler, or ATV. Give him a shout. LoweyLawFirm.com. Thanks, Adam, for your sponsorship of On Texas Football and Rapid Reactions. CJ, I look at this offense, and we can talk as much as you want, but Arch Manning, absolute star of the game. We wondered if how much he would learn from game 1 to game 2. I will say this: he looked like a Manning. 26 of 31, 324. I didn't see a single ball today. This is what was really impressive. 31 throws. I didn't see a single ball thrown in harm's way.
No.
And so I feel like you think about what he was able to do with the Rock on Saturday. Pretty darn impressive for a sophomore, true sophomore, first conference game ever. I felt like he was dialed in from the start, played well. If it weren't for the fumble early, I thought they would have had that as well as the drop on a third down throw to Jonte. Your thoughts on his overall play? Because, dude, he's just a pup. I mean, he's only a sophomore, 5 games into it, and it's his only second start.
That's exactly it. I mean, 26 of 31 in a game like that. I mean, he took the world over by storm, I would say, a little bit against UTSA. You come in for 29 snaps, you score 5 touchdowns. Everybody's thinking, oh, my goodness, this guy is going to live up to the hype. And, maybe a step back a week ago. But again, last night, Bobby, I thought he was tremendous in being able to control the football. And to your point, he didn't put the ball in harm's way at all. And that was really, really impressive. There were still moments, I thought, where, you had the 5 incompletions, and maybe sometimes the ball could have got out earlier. This is being incredibly nitpicky, but the check down was there. And I think, again, that will come with the more and more snaps. We did see one time it felt like he was almost horizontal in the air, and he was like, oh, shoot, I got Jarrett Gibson out in the flat. Let me get it to him. And it worked. But that will come easier and, quicker as he gets more and more snaps. For Arch, again, to take those steps, and we talked about how rocky it was, and Texas offensively didn't have a rhythm for most of that game. And that final drive, that 2-minute drive before halftime, that third down throw that he made to DeAndre Moore, holy cow, Bobby, that's maybe a 60-yard throw in the air. I think it covered 45 yards vertically, but from the opposite hash to outside the numbers on a dot. I mean, my goodness, that is an NFL-level throw, and we've continued to see those bright moments, of course, picking up on moments where he can, kind of clean it up, but I don't think you can ever find a whole lot of reason to be picky and be upset with the 26 for 31 day. That's 83%.
Yeah, I got to say this. As much as we want to tout Arch Manning, Trey Wisner had a good game. Jaden Blue did not. But let's talk about the receivers just briefly, because both Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden had good days. Bond even scored on a reverse. But, hey, welcome to the team and welcome to the show, DeAndre Moore. 2 touchdown catches. You mentioned the one right before half, then one at the end, back of the end zone in the second half. Again, a deep ball, a quasi deep ball from Arch. Moore is proving to be a very key piece of this offense And, he was out. Stark even said in the post-game press conference yesterday, he did not practice that much this week with the hip pointer yet. And I was thinking, hey, maybe it's time for Silas Bolden to get some snaps. We were talking about it pregame, yet DeAndre Moore steps up with 2 TDs.
Yeah, how about that, right? And Sarkisian mentioned it last night after the game. He's like, I went up to DeAndre Moore Thursday and said, if you want to play, you have to practice. We got to see what we can get from you. Turns out he was all right after that hip pointer. 2 touchdowns, 104 receiving yards. He was really a yard short from having a 3-touchdown performance. So if you look back at that first drive, it's interesting how the ball finds different receivers in this offense. And for DeAndre Moore, he's had some pretty unfortunate luck when being targeted, right? Michigan, he had the touchdown called back. Last week, he ended up getting dinged up on the first drive on a pretty tough catch over the middle on 3rd down to move the change. Today, his first target was actually deflected at the line of scrimmage, and you're sitting there thinking, man, they just can't get the ball to him, just for him to come out and then put up the performance that he had. But beyond the receiving, Bobby, it's what he's able to do in the blocking game on the perimeter. That 38-yard run by Trey Wiseman, that doesn't happen if DeAndre Moore isn't out there leading the way with the huge block on the edge to set, a big running lane for him to catch the sideline and get upfield. It's the little things like that. He continues to be the lead blocker on a number of bubbles, quick missile screens, and it's so important that Texas has a guy like this. And again, you almost have to tip your cap to 3 people. 1, Sarkisian. 2, Chris Jackson. 3, Jordan Whittington, because he's not the player he is today, speaking of DeAndre Moore, if it's not for the tutelage and just the underwing taking from Jordan Whittington over the last year.
I couldn't agree more with what you just said, CJ. I really do. I think it's a combination of factors. I really do. And I think that he deserves it. You in the outset, one thing I would agree with you on heavily, I was questioning the Texas run blocking, particularly early on Saturday. Late, they opened some real big holes, and Trey Weiser kind of trucked through them. I even saw a little bit of Jarrett Gibson late. They were trying to rest him on Saturday, trying to rest up his ankle in order to get him healthy for Oklahoma. But they felt like they needed him and put him in there. He did some good work. But I would say this. I thought Texas pass blocked really, really well on Saturday. I thought that Arch had plenty of time. I felt like he had a chance to survey the field. And look, Mississippi State threw some stuff at Arch a little bit too, especially when Texas was backed up a little bit. And I felt like the Texas offensive line, while we may get onto them a little bit about the run blocking in the first half, they provided Arch some time in the pocket.
They absolutely did. And I think what is a bit more encouraging on that is, it was a good day in pass protection, but it can get better. DJ Campbell had a holding. Cole Hudson had a holding. Gunnar Helm out on the edge had a holding. So you take those away, Bobby, and you have a really, really good showing. It was still good, but, to that point, it can certainly improve. And right now with what Texas is able to do with their 2 tackles on the outside that's a really special duo when you got Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams out there to set the edge and protect the quarterback's blind side and front side there. It's encouraging again. I know Mississippi State coming into the game, we talked about it. They don't get after the quarterback that well in comparison to other SEC foes, but a clean sheet today, I was very pleased.
Let me ask you this. You feel like the SEC is more adept at calling holding than the Big 12? I mean, I'm being honest. I felt like, and I saw one of them. I don't necessarily agree with one of the hold calls on Gunnar Helm. The other ones I actually kind of agree with.
Yeah.
And so, but yet we wouldn't have seen half of those called in the Big 12. You know it, and I know it. And so is this going to be a situation where we see more and more of that this season than we do in the Big 12? Because if so, it's going to take a lot of big plays off the board, and it's going to play into the hands, frankly, of a team like Kentucky or Alabama or Georgia that are very, very, very physical football teams. And frankly, you do hold a little bit more often. I mean, what was your takeaway on that?
I mean, I thought it was called a lot, on Saturday, but
much more than in the Big 12, dude. No doubt.
100%. To add a team that I think this benefits, it is Texas, because what's their strength? It's pass rushing. Where do you see holdings mostly called? Pass rushing. Through 5 games so far, Bobby, 10 holding calls in favor of the Longhorns on the defensive side. Now, you'd obviously like to see that cleaned up offensively, but that comes when you face a lot of talented, quick edge rushers. And I think maybe having played UTSA and ULM in back-to-back weeks, there might have been a quick curve that needed to be caught up to in terms of speed and quickness on that defensive front. But you did see, after all, it was a clean day for that offensive line and pass protection as a whole. And what's going to be really interesting is, how does this shape up whenever Texas heads to Dallas in 2 weeks? Texas wants to be a physical team up front. We talked about Colin Simmons and Trey Moore and Barron Sorrell and Ethan Burke. These guys, Vernon Brought needs to be included in that conversation as well. What he's been able to do in the pass rush from that interior, he's drawn 2 holding calls already this year as well. So that'll be interesting. If that continues to be the case in Dallas 2 weeks from now against a bad offensive line for the Sooners, I'm expecting to see some holding calls again.
I would add this, just talking about some things I saw on Saturday that I wanted to go over with you. I saw several big-time plays, I thought. The pass to DeAndre Moore, I thought, was just a big-time play down right before half. Texas needed a pick-me-up, and Arch Manning delivered. I thought the strip sack by Vernon Broughton, who you just brought up, was a huge one. That was a big-time play when his team had just given up a fumble to start the third quarter, and it was a momentum changer, and Texas really never looked back after that play from Broughton. Mississippi State didn't really challenge the red zone again for Texas for another quarter, essentially. And then I'll mention this one. Michael Taft made a great pass breakup in the end zone where Rod Babers said, sometimes defensive backs need to go find work.
Yes.
Michael Taft went and found work on that play. Those 3 plays are probably the biggest reminders for me of the kind of team this Texas team can be because their players are stepping up when they need to step up.
That Michael Taft play, it might have been the play of the game for me. Out of every arch throw, after every big sack that Texas had, to see where I was in the box, to see the whole field, and to find where Michael Taft was when that ball was originally thrown, Bobby, he was not close to where that wide. He was on the opposite side of the field. The slot receiver came wide open over the middle, and for him to turn, find a guy, and it was very similar to what Jahdae Barron did in the season opener when he had that Colorado State interception, to just look around and be cognizant of what's going on the play. That's football IQ to a peak. That, of course, Michael Taft kind of is the epitome of that. It was really, really impressive.
Hey, you said yesterday Sark talked about Taft in the post-game presser. What was the injury again for him?
A stinger, not believed to be too serious, but kind of similarly to what Texas experienced with DeAndre Moore a week ago with kind of the hip pointer. This time, I believe, up in the shoulder area, expected to be evaluated later this week. And, of course, the bye certainly helps.
Any big-time injuries that you can think of or recall? I mean, obviously, Jaden Blue, it looked like it might have been a big-time it might have been a concussion, to be frank. I don't know if they've confirmed that or will confirm that to us, since we won't get an injury report this week, by the way, because Texas is off. Any other injuries of note for the Longhorns that you took note of?
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate timing. When you talk about a kicker and how good they are, they missed the next kick. I had put on the game thread on ontexasfootball.com, Bobby, no injury tent visits. And then you see Ryan Wingo get dinged up on his ankle. He did come back in. I believe that was about 3 minutes before that happened. So a hand up, that's on me. But he did return to the game. It didn't look to be all too serious. He actually returned with a wrap on his right knee, which I thought was interesting. So fortunately there for Texas, good news there. Jaden Blue actually did speak with media members afterward, and I thought there was a great question by Danny Davis over at the Statesman. He said, you didn't have a great game. You had 2 fumbles. You got benched, yet you're sitting here talking to us. What's going on? Jaden, why are you here talking to us? And he goes, I think it's just kind of that maturity that I've undergone over my time here at Texas. And, for that, I'm very thankful for the staff for trusting me. And Sarkisian mentioned it in his own words. We're not giving up on him. He's going to be a big part of this offense. It was just a minor setback for him.
Okay, so you don't think it was a concussion if he's talking to folks post game? Then I mean,
Correct.
clearly Texas
Correct.
wouldn't be putting him out there. He was clearly benched. That's interesting to find that out. All right, a couple other things to talk through here as we talk about the Texas 35-13 victory. Truly, guys, the first ever SEC game for the Longhorns is a victory, 35-13. Any other thoughts about what did Sark talk about a little bit more? Because I heard a little bit in post game. He said that if he had to do it all over again, obviously hindsight 2020, he would have taken the points in the third quarter after Bert Auburn doinked that field goal. You agree with that?
Yeah, I liked the call. I liked it. Maybe
Okay.
I
go up by 2 scores is my piece.
Conference game. I mean, we saw it last year against BYU, where Texas was repeatedly in the red zone. They continued to go for it, and it was a 14-7 game late in the fourth. And you're sitting there thinking Texas should be up by 40, right? I felt that vibe, but at the same time, I kind of got, when a poker player kind of gets tilted and you just want to go all in on the next hand. I kind of got that a little bit from Sarkisian with the way that game began. Fortunately, it didn't come back to bite Texas, and against maybe a more formidable opponent, you would take the points. But Sarkisian did say on third down, he told himself you got 2 plays to get 3 yards. Texas obviously lost some yardage on that third down, but you got them back with the false start, the offsides right after, and you're back in a 4th and 3, 4th and 4 situation. And he had a interesting play call dialed up in his own right, but just didn't execute to the level of his liking, obviously.
No, it did not. And I will say this, Longhorns right now, looking at a situation where they've got a week off now. This is what I want to talk about next. They've got a lot to work on. This is tape that they can learn from, whether it's Jaden Blue's fumbles, whether it's cleaning up some run defense maybe, and also, just some issues with penalties right now. Kyle Flood and the offensive line has to be a little bit beat up with that and the false starts. I think 3 more on Saturday as well. A lot of things that they can work on at this point.
Absolutely. And what's going to be interesting is rewatching that tape, Bobby, and it screamed a little bit of 2022 Texas, right? You saw the penalties, you saw the missed tackles, not so much missed assignments, but guys running around after the catch and after the run that probably should have been brought down a lot earlier. That's going to be good. And I think, again, the rough waters that Sarkisian talked about, the trials and tribulations of playing in the SEC, to be dialed focus after this game where it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, I think is going to be very important to keep this team, ready to go for Oklahoma, to get those errors mixed up. And I think there's going to be a heavy emphasis on finding whatever the remedy is on the offensive line to negate holdings, to negate these false starts and snap infractions. It's been an issue all year, right? You look at Michigan, you had Cam Williams. Now it's DJ Campbell. Now it's Cole Hudson. Jake Majors is up to about 3 or 4 snap infractions on the year. You're sitting there thinking, okay, what's going on here? Why is this happening to a veteran, experienced offensive line? Now they have a week to practice and get ready and figure out what the issue is. Because against an Oklahoma, against a Georgia, you can't be giving away free yards like that.
The Sooners, by the way, are going to be going to have some momentum going into this game in Dallas because they erased an 11-point deficit in the fourth quarter. Michael Hawkins led them back, just to be brutally honest, led them back, scored a big touchdown, and then pick 6 by their defense. Their defense is the leadership of that team. You turn it over against OU, they're going to make you pay. That's what it looks like to me at this point. So Texas has to be aware of that. Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning as leaders of this offense right now. Ewers in particular did not start well in Dallas last year. He finished really well, but hey, he's got to bring it this year. No doubt about it, in my opinion, at least at this point. All right, a couple other things to finish up with here. I picked the player of the game on offense yesterday. I felt was Arch Manning. Player of the game on defense, I went with Colin Simmons. And so let's finish with Colin. 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss. Looked like a man bent for having a bad disposition and getting off the ball. I'll tell you what, he and Anthony Hill, those are 2 guys, CJ, that really care about getting to the football and getting to it with a mean disposition.
Colin Simmons is He's special, Bobby. I mean, it feels like he's got the snap cadence, like he was in the huddle with the offense. He knows when his BGO, his ball get off, his explosiveness off of the snap is special for a true freshman. And to be the team's leading sack leader, in a spot where he's not seeing extended snaps, and that's going to continue. I thought it was really interesting. Sarkisian mentioned in the postgame last night that Texas was able to move him inside over a guard and a center, right? That hadn't necessarily been the case for Colin Simmons this year. He'd strictly been an edge guy against tackles. Now they're able to use him in some of those special NASCAR packages, and that's only going to continue as Texas plays its toughest opponents later on. But right now, what we're seeing from him is I would hate to be lined up against him on a given week, and he's truly making it count right now. That's a freshman All-American in the making, 100%.
No doubt about it. I mean, there's no two ways about it. He's a special guy. All right, that's going to do it for Rapid Reactions this morning. We'll be back a little bit later today. We're going to break down the offensive and defensive grades. Rod Babers does his second watch, and then we have the live stream later tonight. But for CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. Thank you again to our sponsor, Adam Lowy, over at the Lowy Law Firm. Visit him, loweylawfirm.com. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, Adam and his team can help you get the compensation you might deserve. Just call him, and he'll be able to ask you or tell you what he thinks might be legitimate there. All right, CJ, thank you so much. We'll be back for more with the offensive and defensive grades a little bit later today. But for now, 35-13 win over Mississippi State, the first ever SEC game. Longhorns are in the win column. Hook 'em, CJ. You have a good one, buddy.